And these oil companies take advantage of poverty in our country. They take advantage of it. They take advantage of that fact. It's almost like they intentionally want to keep people like that so that they will continue giving them, okay, come, bros, let's give you 5 million naira, sign it off that will fulfill the conditions.
Hello and a warm welcome to another episode of On Rights, Crime and Justice, coming to you from Green Growth TV. For over 10 years now, the Ogale and the Bille communities in Nigeria have fought for justice against one of the world's biggest oil giants, Shell. After years of delays and legal battles, their voices are finally heard with a landmark trial that's ongoing currently at the UK High Court. At the heart of this case is the devastating reality of hundreds of oil spills which have destroyed livelihoods, poisoned water sources, and left tens of thousands struggling to survive. Records have shown that at least 1.5 million tons of crude oil has spilled in the Niger Delta since 1958. And now these communities, alongside 50,000 claimants, are demanding accountability. But Shell has repeatedly argued that it is not legally responsible for the pollution. Now, this trial will determine two critical legal questions that, of course, will have global implications. One is, can oil pollution by a private company be a human rights violation, especially under the Nigerian and African law? And the second is, should Shell be held liable for pipeline damage that has said to be caused by oil theft and illegal refining? So the question is, where do we draw the line between corporate negligence and environmental crime? And if this multinational company is to be held responsible for decades of destruction that we see in these communities, should this set a precedent for criminal penalties of environmental crimes? Well, we'll dive into all of that with Diolu Tobechukwu, Director, Link Green Climate Change Initiative, and Cyrus Ademola, Managing Editor, Energy in Africa. It's great to have you both on the program. I'll start with you, Toby. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. It's great to be here. Good day. It's great to be here.
All right. Thank you so much for joining in. So we'll get right into the conversation. I'll start with the leader of the Ogale community, that's Godwin Bebe Opobi, the leader of the Ogale community in Niger Delta. He has come out to say that he's appealing to the conscience of Shell, stating that their action is against their right to live. And one of the key issues that the case is trying to conclude on is whether oil pollution by this private company can be a violation of the community's fundamental human rights. So looking at the situation that's on ground and the impacts that it has had on the members of the community, first of all, do you think that it would be justified to equate this environmental pollution to human rights violation, as the leader is saying that it's against their right to live as human beings? So do you think we can equate this to a violation of the fundamental human rights of the people of the Niger Delta community?
Yeah, at some point the line, I could not hear you, but I think I get the question.
Okay.
The truth of the matter is, I don't know. I've been to several communities where there've been oil spillage. A lot of people do not really understand the depth of crisis that emanates from an oil spill. Number one, of course, basic human rights is like right to live, right to the basics. Right. Apart from the environmental damage, and environmental damage is not in isolation. Environmental damage affects the livelihood of people. Right to live, right to clean drinking water. There are many instances in these communities where you see the health of community members degrading. Right. You see them suffering from different strange illnesses. One of the major problems we have in Nigeria is that we don't have data. If we have good data, you see, and of course, some organizations have done a lot of analysis as relating to this. So, of course, from every angle, this environmental pollution affects the rights of community people. And because it affects their basic rights, it affects their rights to good health. Definitely, this company should be held accountable. They should be. The question sometimes is even really infuriating most of the time, because you now like, who should take responsibility for this? right? And sometimes when people try to, or this corporation try to dodge responsibilities, it's just because they are trying to be irresponsible. It affects the right of women, it affects the right of children, it affects the right of farmers, and it affects the right of community people. Yeah.
All right, thank you so much for that, Toby. Let me also hear your thoughts on that, Cyrus, as well. Do you agree with that, that we can actually equate this environmental crimes to the violation of the fundamental human rights of these people in the affected communities?
Absolutely, and thank you so much again for having me. I think I would agree with the last speaker also, because if you're talking about oil spillage, you're talking about carbon emission, you're talking about pollution, exposure to toxic water, and even many of the people in this community cannot even go to their farm and to fish or any of those things. So basically, it's right to life, right? And every human being on earth has this right to life. And if you are actually in a situation where there's a lot of oil spillage, there is of deforestation, there is issue about not being able to access, your own properties, because of the damage that's caused by the spillage. Obviously, yeah, it's an environmental issue. It's a human rights issue, and that has been rightly established by different organizations, including the United Nations and other international organizations like that. So you're correct, like this can be equated to um, an human rights violation.
All right, thank you so much, Toby. Still, Cyrus, still staying with you. Of course, if the court rules in favor of the Niger Delta people, it's most likely a fine rather, and a compensation that will be imposed on Shell. But do you think that these financial fines would actually deter corporations, or would criminal penalties be more effective in preventing environmental damages, or do you think that that's overboard? So I want to hear your thoughts on that first of all. Do you think that we can go towards criminal penalties? Because some of this aftermath of the pollution, they are quite dire. For instance, I mean, speaking about right to life, we had a woman that came forward from the community to say that she lost about 8 of her children from drinking these polluted water. So it goes to show how catastrophic the situation is over there. So do you think there should be criminal penalties for this setting environmental crimes?
Oh, okay. I think it's a complicated one because you hear the side of the complainant, and you also hear the side of the IOCs, in this case Shell. And one of the things that they would say, or they would argue, is that the primary cause of oil spillage in those communities are not their fault, right? So, and it's a good argument to make, right? At least on their part, because other things also contributed or contribute to oil spillage in those areas, like oil theft, vandalism, and bunkering, and things like that. So it's kind of dicey to say that they will be held for criminal charges or criminal penalties. Is usually a case of lack of due diligence and negligence on the part of the IOC in terms of watching their pipelines, in terms of ensuring that the environmental act and the environmental regulations and regulatory guidelines are enforced and are put to check. And so that those are the things that they are usually being chased for. And the reason is that when it comes to cases like this, they can go on and on and on for years. So it's not something that you can just it can happen within a short period of time. So, and for the victim in these cases, many of them don't have the luxury of time or the luxury of resources to follow the case through to a criminal charge, a criminal penalty. So what usually happens is that they always settle with out of court settlement, which in most cases always result in fine and compensation, as we've seen in different points. So, like you said, it would be ideal to have situation whereby some of these IOCs are indicted for the things that they are primarily found responsible for, the things that are primarily found responsible for, but it takes a lot of judicial and court processes that many of the victims and the complainant may not have the luxury of time and resources to go, that direction. So I think it's always more, on their part, um, it's always more good for them, let me put it that way, to go through the process of getting the compensation on a fine, though it's a slap in the wrist, but it's the best that I think they could get in cases like this.
All right. How about you, Tobe? Do you agree with that particular position? Do you think that the fine is is sufficient enough, or you agree in another line that a more harsh punishment or penalty should be given? What's your thought on that as well?
We've always clamored for. I'm a grassroots person. My NGO is grassroots. Is a different thing when you see the damage done physically. This is not different from any other crime. It's not different from mass murder. It's not different from. The problem I have is that why it's still an argument is because it's slow. A lot of this, there are a lot of deaths that even unaccounted for that can be traced to oil spillage. And my major problem with these companies is that it's a little too much. In Nigeria, in Niger Delta region, since 1958 till now, we've had over 50,000 oil spills. Do the mathematics. In Saudi Arabia, in Qatar, we're not the only country that has been. How many of these countries do you hear that there's an oil spillage? I mean, so this thing is just irresponsibility from the corporations. And my problem is when the greenwashing, when you channel everything to just pay fine, there are many things involved. Number one, the company just say, okay, we have made billions from you. And just like somebody steals 50 billion and you are telling him to give you 5 million naira as bail. I equate it like that. If you do that, it makes no difference, right? And it's even very hard for them to even get that money, right? But so we have to start from the laws. We have to start from the laws. We have to start from policies that guides oil corporation. We have to make the penalty more strict. When we do that, when people are held accountable, who is the engineer that worked on this pipe? Just for example, when a building collapses, right? You can hold, okay, the first thing they do is that who is the engineer that worked on this building? And I think that is the same thing that should be done for this oil company. Who worked on these pipes? Who should be responsible for it? This is a criminal offense.
Let me come to you, Cyrus. We're looking at Shell's defense, and in their defense, they blamed that the vast majority of oil spills are caused by illegal third-party interference, like you've already alluded to, like the pipeline sabotage and oil theft. And of course, that's very rife in Niger Delta. We all know that. And the Shell spokesperson even said that the litigation would not be able to address the real issue that is caused by the oil spills, which is, like I've said, the oil theft. So first of all, do you agree with this? Do you think that that is enough to get them off the liability that's being put on them? How justifiable is that argument by the Shell spokesperson?
Okay, the question is directed to me, right?
Yes.
Okay. I think there is some argument to be made there. Obviously, the issue in Niger Delta is more complex than just pointing fingers at IOCs alone, international oil companies. There's this part of the host communities, not to blame the victims, but in some cases, what usually happens is that those who represent those communities as speakers and as leaders of those communities do not really represent the interest of the people, the residents, the dwellers of those communities. And the reason is that they themselves don't even understand how this oil industry works. And that's always been the case. So most of the time we hear when these IOCs come to communities and say, we want to start up, or we discover maybe an oil well here, want to start a oil drill or something, and what can we do to help your community and things like that. We hear many of them say things like, oh, you can build a school, you can build an hospital, instead of putting more emphasis on regulations, putting more emphasis on human capital development, putting more emphasis on having the right guideline and safety net to ensure that there is no oil theft, there's no vandalism, there's no bunkering and whatnot. So, like I said, it's a breakdown of communication and synergy on the part of the host communities and the IOCs. But the fact is that the IOCs ought to know better, right? They ought to. They are the ones that are coming with the resources, with the investment, and they are the ones that have almost everything to gain. So I think it's not enough to excuse them of their negligence. But like I said, it's an argument to make them, that there are certain non-state actors that sometimes, cause these bunkeries and oil spills because of oil theft. So there's an argument to make there, but it's not an excuse. It's not enough excuse for them, not to take responsibility for their own part, in the whole process. So yes, they could make the argument, and the court might, consider it. In most cases, in most Nigerian courts, right, those arguments do fly. But in other foreign courts like the United Kingdom, Dutch, and other places like that, where Shell has made similar argument, they've actually been, faced with the pushback from the judges to say no, that it doesn't work that way. You still have to take responsibilities.
All right, thank you so much, Cyrus. Let me come back to you, Tobe. So let's track back to a certain investigation that happened in 2011. The UN carried out an investigation in the Niger Delta, and it revealed the high level of pollution with their waters, especially containing carcinogen that's 900 times higher than the international standard. Very unfortunate and really scary when I came across that. And so, of course, the Nigerian government said they were going to carry out an investigation and a cleanup in partnership with Shell, of course, and they embarked on this, but there was a lot of corruption that came in with inflation of project prices and even the kind of agencies they used. I don't know whether it could be incompetence or just intentional disregard. They were said to have marked some unclean places as clean, and it was generally just referred to by the Niger Delta people as a scam. So now the question is, does that particular situation that happened in 2011 reflect an intentional oversight? And when it comes to environmental justice and environmental crimes, can we say that the government obviously treats environmental crimes as low priorities? What does that reflect on the part of the government in certain situations like this?
Man, see, most times when I'm opportune to have this kind of conversations, I wish we can just sit down in a round table for 5 hours to talk about these things. Then I begin to show you a lot of documents and research work that I've done, because a lot of these things are complex. We have a very critical situation in this country, right? And one of the critical situations is that we have a government that is not environmentally aware, right? And secondly, a lot of both the corporation, the government, a lot of organizations, they're just interested in profits, right? Nigeria is, sadly, Africa, mostly Nigeria, of course, we have this consumer mentality. We don't have sustainability or sustainable practice. We do not think of the aftermath of this action. For example, if you look at this community in Bayelsa, where oil was first discovered, I did a documentary on it, and you see how the community is now. You now wonder, for 50 years of exploring, there's no effect on this community, right? So most of what we see is, of course, we talked about the cleanup, we still see it today. There's this lackadaisical attitude. As long as they have explored, they have sold the oil, we have made our profits, that's it. And that's why you see this very lackadaisical attitude in the part of the government and regulators. Secondly, the corruption is terrible. You go to, you see, because it still takes a regulator to approve. And these oil companies take advantage of poverty in our country. They take advantage of it. They take advantage of that fact. It's almost like they intentionally want to keep people like that so that they will continue giving them, okay, come, bros, let's give you 5 million naira, sign it off, that will fulfill the conditions. We have policies in this country. We have the PIA Act. We have a lot of policies that spells out what oil companies should do. But then you see that many of the time they cut corners. They cut corners. They can just pay you and somebody will just sign it off. At every level, from local government level to community, the CDC in the community, from federal government level, ministry, at every level. And of course, why it's annoying is that those international oil companies see these loopholes and they use it. They use the divide and rule tactics, and they use it. And so because one thing I know is that and I always say it everywhere I go, if you want to know how bad it is, go and check what is happening in Qatar. Go and check what is happening in Saudi Arabia. You don't hear things like this. It's just that these guys have taken advantage of our corrupt system at every level. And they just exploited it.
Thank you so much, Toby. Very interesting perspective there. But we'll take a pause on the conversation, and when we come back, we'll look into what really is at stake in this case. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. You're still watching On Rights, Crime and Justice, coming to you from Gringo TV. So far, we've analyzed the ongoing legal arguments between the Shell and the people of the Niger Delta community. And of course, we've heard very interesting perspectives from our guests. So I'll come to you now, Cyrus. First of all, let's look at this from what's at stake on this case that's ongoing. If, for instance, Shell wins or loses this case, how would it change the landscape, especially for these multinational corporations operating in resource-rich developing countries like Africa? Some have said especially that if this case is successful, it would actually be the first time in legal history that a UK multinational would be found to have breached the company's human rights due to environmental pollution. But aside that, just in general, how much is at stake, especially for the people of Niger Delta that are actually in this community, in this particular case, if they win or if they lose? Why is this case so important?
Okay, thank you again for the question. I think just like every case has been brought, I think Shell has about 160 or so cases going on, at different courts, both locally and internationally, concerning environmental pollution. So almost all cases carry, some weight because it affects the lives and livelihood of the people that are being affected. Like we said, what's at stake basically would be that they being absolved of responsibility if the case go in negative way. And if it goes a positive way, just a step, just a little step in the right direction in terms of, holding big corporations accountable, particularly in the environment that people are very vulnerable, very poor, and they've suffered the most. So I think, but on the larger part, I would say these are just one of those last cases that would be tried concerning Shell itself as a company, because Shell is now scaling back seriously on its onshore activities. It has sold its assets on onshore to local companies, a consortium of I think Aradel, First E&P, and three others. So what that simply means is that they will not be held responsible anymore, going forward if that sales is approved by, or that divestment is approved by the federal government. And I think it was last month or so, there was a nod on the part of the Minister of Oil and Gas for there to receive approval. So it's imminent that Shell is leaving Nigeria onshore after over 50 years of operation because of all of these issues that have to do with oil spills, legalities, environmental concerns, and whatnot. And so the bigger question would be, would those indigenous companies, those indigenous oil companies, would they be held accountable? I don't think there is enough guidelines or laws or regulatory imposition for them to be held accountable for, the ongoing challenges or the ongoing legal issues that are going on there. So basically, it's going to be a tough time for the people in the Niger Delta because the indigenous community, though there might be some kind of rapport, because these are not foreign companies, these are companies that are situated in Nigeria. But whether this case wins or loses, in the nearest future, you most likely or less likely rather see cases like these that have been tried by Shell or Chevron or ExxonMobil or the rest of them, because they are heavily scaling back on Nigeria onshore activities.
All right, thank you so much, Cyrus, for that. Now, Toby, of course, you've spoken a bit about the responsibility even of the Nigerian government, and on this particular case a lot of attention has been fixed on Shell companies away from the Nigerian government. I mean, because you spoke earlier about the fact that they're riding on our poverty, but I mean, one can say that it's the government that's actually giving them that way in, through us. So of course the question now is, who do you really think should ultimately bear the responsibility for this decades of pollution in the Niger Delta? Should it be Shell or the Nigerian government or both even? But I wanted to also give us that perspective of what the Nigerian government also has to play in what their people, because at the end of the day, the Niger Delta community is the Nigerian government's major responsibility. It is their people. So who should bear the ultimate brunt at the end of the day? I mean, the ultimate responsibility, rather. Yes,
the truth of the matter, it's I believe the problem with holding government responsible is that the government is transient. Which particular government do you hold responsible? Do you hold Buhari's government responsible? Do you hold? I mean, a lot of what's even happened in Ogoni, right, from the negligence or from the military role down to a lot of what this democratic government is even trying to do is to repair the years of damage that has been caused from especially Abacha's government. Military. That's where we had the Ogoni crisis and all that. So holding the government has tried to come up with a lot of policies. See, the governments are not angels. They still have people at the grassroots level that should enforce many of these things. If you go through the PIA Act, you see that some of these things clearly spelled out. Before an oil company or IOC comes to a community to start drilling oil, they should present certain documents, 5-year development plan, needs assessment, you sign MOU with the community, general memorandum of understanding, you carry out the ESG and all those things. And these documents has to do with regulation, it has to do with stricter policies and enforcement. But who should be held accountable should be the oil companies. I still say it till today, it should be the oil companies. They are the ones that make the profits. It is that they make it everywhere, right? Nobody wants to take responsibility for anything, but they should be held accountable. It is their business, it's their money, it's their profits. If you open a business, you are accountable for your staffs, and you're accountable for this. So it's the oil company that should be held responsible. However, the role of the government should now be enforcing many of these policies that are already on ground. Trust me, Nigeria do not have a policy problem. We have an enforcement problem, because you have to go through every layer that is responsible for keeping these guys in check. But you have players. Before Ken Saro-Wiwa died, he said it that no oil company works in isolation. There are military apparatus that support what they are doing. There are local apparatus. Every single element in this value chain, makes up the entire corrupt system, right? So the government should make sure that these people are held responsible, and every element should be looked at squarely. First, by flushing out the corrupt elements, and then making sure that, look, these companies do the right thing.
Okay, you spoke a bit about profit that these people are making, and of course I want to go to that aspect, looking at the suffering of the communities in the Niger Delta, while of course the oil companies are profiting. Now let's look at it from the aspect of clean energy transition. Do you think that one of the reasons why as much is not being done towards clean energy transition is because of this profit that they're making, both the oil companies and the government in collaboration? And if that's the case, how do you think we should approach this transition, which would of course even provide a fairer alternative for economic development? What do you think is Nigeria's stance on moving towards clean energy?
Okay, I'll answer this. First of all, of course, look, we have a lot of people benefiting from this oil sector, and so the body language. Look, we have the NDCs, right, which is the National Determined Contribution. We have this current energy transition plan that was sanctioned by the last administration. It was clearly stated that Nigeria is going to move to net zero by 2060, even though the entire world agreed on 2030. It is said that they are going to cut down our use of fossil fuel. But the problem I have with a lot of these policies and a lot of these things that are being said is that they are telling us what they want to do, but not how they are going to do it. So anybody can just sit down and say, by 2030, we want to move away from fossil fuel, but you are still commissioning new oil wells in Ogoni. So you see that the body language is very different. from what they are putting on paper, right? And a lot is two things. It's not just Nigeria, it's global. Look at what's happening in the US. It's a global thing that a lot of governments do not want to, they are comfortable with fossil fuel, is already giving us money, so, and secondly, because transitioning is expensive. That's the truth.
Yeah.
A lot of what some NGOs have been talking about is moving the money. The subsidy globally from fossil fuel should be moved, research and development for renewable energy, right? And Nigeria Energy Transition Plan is even talking so much.
Okay.
So there has to be a lot of capital development on ground, and that's, I feel like our government is not ready. The body language, nobody wants to leave their comfort zone. Everybody's just comfortable. Let's throw in a little bit of policy here and there, but no real practical step to transition away from fossil fuel.
All right, thank you so much, Toby. How about you, Cyrus? I want to also get your thoughts on that as well. What is Nigeria's stance on this clean energy transition? How soon, or in what way basically can we fit this into what we're doing and improve, like Toby is pointing out, our implementation more than just laying down the policies?
Yeah, well, I would say that it's complicated. It's very complicated. It's not a one size fits all thing. Like the last speaker said, transition is quite expensive, and you also have to look at the comparative advantage in terms of, your country. Like, what does your country have, and how can you quickly achieve development and growth? And one basic thing about Nigeria is that the federal government has a very huge stake in oil production in this country. About 50% of upstream oil companies in Nigeria is owned by the federal government through a joint venture system. So, if in that kind of situation, how can you say the federal government should let go its own source of income, and then start looking at something that is not yet feasible by its own account? So basically, I'm not against energy transition. I think there's a lot of things going on in rural electrification, for example. There's a lot of investment in solar energy on the part of the federal government in electricity. That's some part of it. There is also issue of financing. There's this seminar that just ended, I think a forum that just ended in partnership with the World Bank and the AFDB, that's the African Development Bank, that's headed by Dr. Akim Adesina. So, and they are talking about, financing rural electrification with about 300 million people, with about a lot of money, about $1.5 billion will be directed to Nigeria, for example, towards green energy, towards solar, towards wind energy, and others like that. So there's a lot of things on one part that's going on in that area. But on the other part, you have to keep in mind that Nigeria also generates, about 40% of its revenue from oil. So, and if you have that kind of situation, it will take a lot of effort and calculated move for you to move away from, your revenue source to another source or another industry that might not be as profitable as that. So I think it's a question of how feasible it is and how profitable it is but in the long term, I still believe that because of the global move, the global shift, in energy consumption and energy demand, I don't think Nigeria will have to sustain the whole oil production as a prime source of revenue. They still have to look at other things. So that alone might, impede upon them to want to look at other source of energy, where energy transition comes in.
All right. So finally, as we wrap up
Sorry, can I
wrap up
just
the
chip in
program,
something?
oh yeah, sure.
Okay, I just
No,
wanted
please
to
go ahead. Okay.
add a little to that. Thank you,
Of
Mr.
course.
Cyrus. Powerful. One major problem is simple. We do not have a sustainability mindset. At what costs are you drilling? Like, we should be able to count the costs and say, look, this is bad for the environment. Let us look 100 years away from now. So a lot of world leaders are now. How much are we making now? How much are we making now?
Yeah.
We have very few leaders that have sustainability mindsets.
That's true. Yes. All right. Thank you so much for that, Toby. So let me just wrap up the program, but let me hear your final thoughts, Mr. Cyrus, and then we'll come back to you, Toby. Finally, because it's quite obvious that going back to what's happening with Shell and even the previous things that have happened, it's quite obvious that many states treat environmental crimes as conservation issues, and they see it as less victimless crimes. And of course, it's important to shift this perception of environmental crimes from victimless offenses to like the way people see it, for people to see that these are actually critical threats to public health and security. So just finally, your thoughts on how we can achieve this particular shift. In what way can we allow people to see the importance, especially the government, because they're the ones that will be in charge of the reforms, because that's another thing as well. What reforms have they put in place to prevent this kind of exploitation of especially the weak communities in the country? So how, in what way can we shift this perspective and this perception rather towards achieving a more higher priority given to environmental crimes?
Well, I think I think the awareness is going on. I think there's a lot of social orientation from NGO, from international communities, and but the problem, I think, on the part of Nigeria is that historically we've had a situation where there's no strong and well laid out policy framework that guides implementation against environmental infraction, environmental pollution, and whatnot. So. And that's because of our sad history of the military interference to our government. But in 2021, the PIA was passed, right? And that really opened the door to having a very strong regulatory body, regulatory framework that can impose certain rules and guidelines to ensure that these things are looked into. So what people should do, or stakeholders should do, is to keep conversing, to keep promoting these things, and to also ensure that the state government, the subnationals, are aware of all the consequences that come with this and treat it with the best global international standard. I think that would be like the right way to go about it.
Thank you so much, Cyrus, for joining in on the program. Let me also come to you as well, Toby. Your final thoughts on specific reforms that we need, whether legal reforms, civil reforms, whatever, to ensure that this issue of environmental crimes is given much more priority.
Okay. To be very specific, as Mr. Cyrus said, a lot of sensitization is already going on. But this is what I will say from history. A lot was happening in Ogale land till Ken Saro-Wiwa came on board to start doing strong media campaign and activism, right? You mentioned something earlier about a woman that lost eight of her children. I've heard a lot of these stories. I strongly believe that the way this government and the international organizations and corporations and Nigerians will now become fully aware of the danger of oil corporations and oil spillage and irresponsible drilling and exploitation is through massive media awareness, massive media campaign. Look at the video you have been playing. You see how when you see those women on the floor, it strikes a different chord in the hearts of people. People begin to see these things more seriously. I did a documentary about a woman that says she lost 4 of her 6 children, because of this oil crisis. I've done a lot of videos. There's one particularly on my YouTube channel where you see a woman that says she was looking, her child drowned. When we talk about climate injustice and flooding, by the time we begin to highlight some of these stories, and a lot of organizations now begin to push for data-driven advocacy, go to communities, take the pain to do a serious, long research. How is the health of this community? How was it before this oil company came in? How was the water? Let's because a lot of what we do is just emotional advocacy. We need to, because before you can hold corporations accountable, you must be able to benchmark. This is how it was before, and this is how it is now. You must be able to measure. Look, this is how many people that has been. They do a lot of that in the US and another country. We have strong data. So we look at data. We have to increase our data, incident reporting, because this crimes is underreported. trust me, I know what I've seen in communities, right? If we have real data and then we mix it with activism and advocacy, we'll put these people under pressure because they don't like being called out. But when we put them under pressure, I've gone to communities. Recently, we went to Okuma and they turned us back. You can't video here, you can't on your camera here. There are some communities in Bielsa where we went to do so and they turned us back. They're afraid. A lot of them, they know that once you show the world what's really going on, there will be an international cry. A lot of us will come out and start making noise about it. And we must emphasize on that. Corporations must be fearless. I'm looking for the days where we'll have more Kensarawiwas, more activists that can come, because I feel that's the only way to go. People begin to make noise about this injustice and then tell more stories that will appeal to the conscience of Nigerians and also change the narrative.
Thank you so much, Toby. I'm sure you're up to being the next Ken Saro-Wiwa of our time with those very interesting perspectives you brought. Thank you so much for joining on the program. You know, as it's clear, the Shell lawsuit is more than just a legal battle. It's a fight for justice, accountability, and obviously the fundamental rights to even life, and of course to live in a cleanable and a livable environment. No matter the outcome of this case, one thing is clear is that the era of unchecked corporate pollution is being challenged. And if justice prevails, this definitely would empower affected communities, not just in Nigeria, but around the world, to stand up against environmental exploitation. This is just one battle in a larger fight as the world confronts climate change, and of course we can see the dangers of fossil fuel dependency. We must ask, how do we prevent future Niger Deltas? Of course, that is in the case of what's happening with the community, and how we can transition to cleaner energy while ensuring justice for those that have already been affected. Finally, it's very clear that the verdict of this case will be historic and monumental for the environmental justice. But of course, like we've said, the fight is far from over. And that's a wrap on the program today. Let's have your comments in the comment section on what you think about the ongoing case between Shell and the people of the Niger Delta community. Many thanks for watching. I'm Tony Gubanjo. It's bye for now.